Hi, I'd like to talk about the differences between living in South Korea and living in California. Just to give you a little background, I was born and raised in the LA area, and when I was 27, I moved to South Korea to become an English teacher, and I lived there for about 17 years. I met my wife in 2014 while living in South Korea, and then we just recently moved back to California um, in December of 2020. It is currently September 2021, so I just want to talk about the positives and the negatives of both living in California compared to living in Seoul, South Korea specifically. Um, I'm going to tell you some different aspects. I might talk about the transportation. I'd like to talk about the food, the pace of life, the people, pets. Believe it or not, there's a difference between how people view pets and also health insurance. Um, I'm going to start with talking about transportation. Now, I lived in Seoul, so public transportation is huge, and the subway system is amazing. The bus system is great. They have a high-speed train going from Seoul to the second largest city in Korea called Busan. There's also a high-speed train going to the east side of South Korea where the beaches are. Um, yeah, the public transportation in South Korea cannot be rivaled by any country in this world. It's just fantastic. Obviously, in California, that's not the deal at all. In the 1920s, we had cable cars, and the oil companies wanted to take those all out, and now Californians rely on driving everywhere. So, yeah, we have freeways and highways, but we have Amtrak, which is not the best train um, railway, I should say, railway system in the world. But yeah, that's as far as we get as far as public transportation is concerned. Of course, we have buses, which have gotten better, I have to say, but they don't come nearly close to what it's like in South Korea because the public transportation system in South Korea is amazing. It's really great. But on the other hand, I like driving and I really enjoy road trips. So that's a good thing about living in California. You do People do take road trips in Korea, but you don't go very far because it's a small country. So there's a lot to see in California. So that's another difference. So when you take a road trip, you might go for long distances and see a whole lot of different things such as mountains, beaches, valleys, you name it. So that's the transportation aspect. So let's move on to food. I would say that Korean food in South Korea is amazing. You can't find food, any Korean food in California that matches it. There are places that are pretty close in Koreatown and some aspects of Orange County, like Fullerton. Um, yeah, that are really good. But then you're going to pay a lot more than you would in Seoul. So Korean food in South Korea is not that expensive and it's delicious. And you can find delicious Korean food in California, but you're gonna pay a little bit more. Um, so I would say also eating out is generally more expensive in California, but in Seoul you're gonna eat if you're gonna eat foreign food in Seoul, that's a bit more expensive. But again, Korean food in South Korea is not that expensive. Um, Grocery stores, yeah. As far as food is related to grocery stores, in Korea, fruit and vegetables are very expensive because they have to import everything. Beef is very expensive for the same reason. They do have cows in Korea, um, but there's a lot more cattle in California, so you're going to pay a lot less for beef here. Um, Snacks are a bit different. In Korea, you get a lot of sweet snacks, but Americans like salty snacks a lot more. Um, if you go to the grocery store, you're going to see a whole aisle of ice cream in California. You definitely won't see that in Korea. So that's a big difference there. It's pretty it's That's reverse culture shock for me when I came back here. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it with regards to food. The pace of life is definitely different. In Seoul, on during rush hour, people rush to get to the subway, and sometimes the subways are crowded and packed, and sometimes you're up like this against people during rush hour. Maybe between 9 and 10 in the morning, and also after 10 p.m. at night. Believe it or not, 10 p.m. is a crowded time in the heart of Seoul on the subway. You won't believe it. Um, but because the subway system is really good, that's why people take it, and it's cheap. So that's why people love the subway system. Um, yeah, as I said, it's just a rush lifestyle. I think Seoul is very much like New York. People in California are a lot more slower. They're little bit slower. Obviously, people from Nebraska or Oklahoma might say Californians are a lot faster than them, but compared to Seoul, it's a lot slower, and it's a lot more relaxing, especially because the weather is good most of the year. That has a huge impact on people's mental state. Because in Korea, the weather's not that great, except for the fall when it's really beautiful. Spring is good, except they have fine dust during that season, so that's also not a good aspect. And winter is really, really cold, and summer is extremely humid and hot. So I forgot to mention that's another aspect that I was going to talk about, the positives and negatives, the weather. The people, I would say Californians are really friendly. You can go to a restaurant and the servers are really polite, and some of them they might even know your name. And if you go more often, they'll definitely know some parts of your life, like about your children or your brothers and sisters. And people are just really, really friendly, and they get to know you. Even on the street, people say hi to each other. You might be at a market, and you might say, "Oh, yeah, these apples look good, don't they?" You might just talk to a random stranger about apples in the grocery store. So that's a really cool thing. Um, in Korea, as a foreigner, I would say people are very friendly towards me. You might get some people that are a little bit afraid to talk to me because they're afraid that they don't speak good enough English. But generally, I would say Koreans are very friendly. Um, you know, they don't usually talk to strangers. And that's just an Asian thing, and you won't see that in China or Japan as well. But once you get to know Koreans, they're really friendly people, and you can develop some good friendships. Um, as far as towards foreigners in general, I would say Americans are very friendly. My wife did have one bad experience. We just recently went to the Getty Center Museum in LA, and she went to the bathroom, and this older lady noticed that she was Asian, and then she asked if she had gotten her vaccine. As that's such a strange question. But I really think it's because she was Asian and she was just had this fear of Asian people. On the other hand, we were in Malibu um, a month ago, and we were walking and hiking in the mountain areas, and we were just walking down this random street, and this man saw my wife, and he asked where she was from, and she said she was Korean, and he's like, "Oh, I love Korean people. I really love Korean Americans," and he had a really positive positive comment about Asian people, so that was really nice. So we're gonna move on to pets now. I It's amazing how Americans love their pets. You go to the park, you'll see dogs everywhere, and commercials have so many pet commercials about pet food or how to treat your pet, etc. You just will not see that in South Korea. Um, yeah, I mean, they do have pets. They usually have small dogs because in Seoul, people live in apartments, so they don't have a lot of space. Um, so, yeah, you'll definitely see people with dogs. And before, people didn't like cats that much. And a lot of it was based on superstition. Um, but nowadays, you'll see people with cats. But the affection for animals just doesn't really rival the way people in California love their pets. It's just, even my wife was really shocked by that. And she doesn't really hate pets, and she likes rabbits and she likes turtles, but she's not a huge fan of cats and dogs. but she's really amazed that Americans really love cats and dogs. So yeah, pets are a huge aspect in California, and some aspect. I mean, Koreans do like pets, but just not as much as the way Californians do. Health insurance is a big one. When I lived in South Korea, insurance was great. I got my ear surgery. Uh, Let me explain. So when I was 18, I had gotten a hole in my eardrum because I had swum under the water and I tried to do a somersault underwater. It wasn't really smart, and I popped my eardrum. And so I had gotten um, surgery on that here. And obviously, the doctor was good. My mom had good health insurance. Um, and then when I was in Korea, I was at a water park, and my friend splashed ear in that same ear that I had surgery on, and he got a direct hit. I mean, he couldn't have splashed it any better. If he was aiming at my ear, it was perfect. So anyway, it redamaged my eardrum, and I didn't know what to do. So, but I had good insurance in Korea, and so I had a one night stay there. I had my own private room, and I noticed that I only spent about $600 for that surgery. Um, and I was just an English teacher. It wasn't like I was in a profession that was really like a white collar job. I didn't have a white collar job. I was just an English teacher, and yet insurance was fantastic. So moving back to California in December, and then in February of this year, I got a job as a caregiver. So I'm in the healthcare profession, and I tried to get healthcare or get insurance through my company itself. And I couldn't believe how expensive it was. It would cost me over $1,000. And I'm only working part-time at the moment. I just cannot afford it. So obviously I couldn't afford my own insurance that my company offered me. It was just ridiculous. So I have to take Medi-Cal, which is okay. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's the low cost insurance that me and my wife both have. So we have to go to urgent care if we need help, and it's not bad, but it pales in comparison to the healthcare in Korea. It's just ridiculous. So yeah. I forgot to mention there's one more aspect that I didn't put on my list, that there's a huge difference in the countries, and that's music. In Korea, you might have a recent pop song, and people love it. Everyone's talking about it. My students as an English teacher were talking about it. My coworkers, the manager, blah blah blah. But then in 2 months, you won't hear people talk about that song as much. There's another song that comes and it's more popular. And then if you talk about song A, they would say, "Oh, that song's old." 2 months, and I'm not even kidding. In Korea, things happen so quickly, and Koreans forget things so quickly too. So it's like if you hear a song that's 5 years old, they'll think, "Oh, that song is really, really old." You know, but that's one thing I appreciate about Americans. I listen to K Earth, or I might listen to 94.7 The Wave, and stations like that in California that are LA stations. And you hear songs from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even music up until today. Americans appreciate good music, and it doesn't matter if it's old or new. They just like good music. And if it's 6 months old, they still play it. If it's 10 years old, they'll play it. So it's just not a big deal. But in Korea, if it's 6 months old or a year old, it's I don't know, the song's too old, and they don't want to listen to it anymore. And the same with movies as well. Koreans don't really like old movies, and they don't like black and white movies, but Americans like those things, especially It's a Wonderful Life. That's a movie that Americans watch every Christmas time. So it's just amazing how the perspectives are different on both sides. So those are just a few things that are different and are also similar in both of California and South Korea. So yeah, that's it.